Welcome to episode 10 of The Evidence Room. Inside every investigation, the truth is hidden in the evidence. Tonight, we explore one of South Korea's most chilling and long-running serial murder cases.
Yeah, and this is actually our first case exploring South Korea, which is fascinating.
It really is. It's a country where, at the time, rapid modernization just completely collided with one of the most haunting criminal investigations in its history.
Absolutely.
So imagine you're looking at a society that is just sprinting toward the future, right? They're bathed in neon light, getting ready for the global stage, but then just outside the city limits, a predator is operating completely unchecked in the shadows.
Right, and it's a perfect storm of circumstance.
Exactly. This deep dive is really about how this massive collision of a rapidly changing society and, frankly, an under-resourced police force led to decades of terror. It's about a staggering miscarriage of justice and a truth that took over 30 years to finally uncover.
Yeah, to really grasp how this happened, you have to understand the setting. We're talking about South Korea in the 1980s.
Right.
The country is on the precipice of hosting the 1986 Asian Games and then the 1988 Olympics. So Seoul is just booming. It's this blindingly bright metropolis meant to show the world that South Korea has arrived.
And then you have Hwaseong.
Exactly. If you go just an hour south of that glittering capital,
Yeah.
you cross into Hwaseong and it's a completely different world.
Yeah, it's like a dark, quiet forest right on the edge of a blindingly bright city. It wasn't some modern suburb. It was rural, mountainous, filled with sprawling rice paddies, unlit dirt roads.
And very little infrastructure.
Right, so modernization just hadn't reached it yet, leaving the residents, especially women, incredibly vulnerable as they walked home from these really sparse, isolated bus stops.
Yeah, I mean, imagine getting off a bus in the pitch black and having to walk 2 miles through high-stalk rice fields just to get to your front door.
It's terrifying. Which brings us to the catalyst for this whole nightmare, September 1986.
Right.
The first disappearance. A 71-year-old woman named Lee Won-im vanishes after visiting her daughter.
And, initially, her death barely even registers with the authorities.
Wait, a murder happens and they just ignore it?
Well, it's not that they ignored it, but they only assigned 3 police officers to it.
Just 3. For a homicide.
Yeah, because the vast majority of the country's police forces were actually deployed to Seoul. They were there to protect the Asian Games from potential North Korean threats.
Wow, okay, so the state's entire focus is elsewhere.
Exactly. So the local precinct is basically left to fend for itself.
And because of that, the killer gets comfortable. The horror just escalates. More women start vanishing along those dirt roads. And the victims, they range widely in age. We're talking teenagers all the way up to women in their 70s.
Yeah, there wasn't a specific age demographic he was targeting. It was about vulnerability. But the modus operandi, the signature that linked these crimes, was incredibly distinct.
Right, the binding.
Yes, the victims were bound, sexually assaulted, and strangled. But the chilling part is that he used their own clothing.
Their stockings, socks, underwear.
Exactly. He never brought a weapon with him.
Which makes me wonder, from a profiling standpoint, if the killer is exclusively using items already present at the scene, like the victim's own clothes, does that suggest these were crimes of pure impulsive opportunity or a highly calculated psychological game?
Oh, it was definitely calculated. He was a very clever psychopath.
Really?
Yeah, by not bringing a weapon or rope, he's leaving virtually no trace evidence of his own behind. He maintained an incredibly minimal footprint.
That makes sense. It's terrifyingly smart. And naturally, that level of clinical precision just starts paralyzing the community.
Oh, completely. The terror-gripping Hwaseong was absolute.
Yeah, women just refused to go out at night. It became this real-life boogeyman myth coming true, fundamentally reshaping the psychology and daily habits of the entire region.
And when a community is that terrified, and the police have zero answers, you start seeing rumors and superstitions pop up.
Ugh, the red dress rumor. I wanted to bring this up because it's just so wild.
Yeah, the belief that he specifically targeted women wearing red on rainy days.
Right, and people believed it so deeply. Women just stopped wearing red altogether. Locals even erected a scarecrow in the fields as a talisman to, ward him off.
It was desperation. And it wasn't just the locals. The police were so desperate they actually had female police officers dress up in red and walk around as bait to lure him out.
Wait, the police actually did that?
Yes, they did.
Wow. That just highlights the massive investigative failures and the limitations of the time, which naturally makes you ask, what were the police actually doing about this scientifically?
Well, scientifically, they were in the dark ages.
Yeah.
South Korean forensics in the late 80s had massive limitations. They had absolutely no DNA testing capacity.
None at all.
None. And even with fingerprints, they were analyzed manually by the human eye.
Oh, man. So just a guy with a magnifying glass.
Pretty much. Which brings us to their fatal flaw.
Yeah.
Blood typing was really their only scientific weapon.
Right.
The police found biological samples at a scene, ran a test, and falsely determined that the killer had blood type B.
But wait, if they only have a blood type, and it turns out to be the wrong blood type, aren't they basically filtering out the actual killer from the start?
Yes, exactly. It was the single biggest error of the entire investigation. They anchored their whole manhunt on this one flawed piece of data.
So they're hunting a ghost with type B blood. And because they lack precise science, they just resort to sheer brute force manpower.
The numbers are mind-boggling.
Yeah, the statistics are just staggering. Over 2 million man-days spent on the case.
2 million.
Over 21,000 suspects investigated. Over 40,000 fingerprints taken.
It was what criminologist Yeom Hwaseong compared to throwing a net and hoping to catch a random fish.
That is a great analogy.
They were just collecting hair, saliva, and blood from practically every man in the region, but they had absolutely no way to properly process all that data.
And obviously, all that failing effort creates this intense pressure cooker. The media is criticizing them, the public is terrified, and that leads directly to this tragic scapegoat situation.
Yes, the 8th murder.
Right. September 1988. A 14-year-old girl named Park Sang-hee is killed. But this one is different. It's not outdoors on a dirt road. She is killed in her own bed.
And that completely breaks whatever remaining patience the public had. The media attacks the police, accusing them of swinging in vain. Officers are being threatened with forced resignation.
So they need a win.
They desperately need someone to take the fall. Enter Yoon Sung-yeo.
Yoon Sung-yeo, he was a 22-year-old welder.
Yeah, and he was an incredibly easy target for them. He was poor, uneducated, and he was physically disabled from childhood polio.
Which is just heartbreaking, and the evidence they used against him was so flimsy.
Flimsy is an understatement. They found traces of titanium, which is used in welding on some hair at the scene,
Right.
and the police claimed that hair matched blood type B.
Even though we know their blood typing was completely unreliable.
Exactly.
So they bring Yoon in, and what happens in that interrogation room is just horrific. It's a 3-day interrogation.
It was torture.
Literally. He is beaten, starved, kept awake for days. They force this disabled man to do squats until he finally breaks and gives them a coerced confession.
They just needed him to sign a piece of paper so they could close the case.
But wait, here's the thing that drives me crazy. The police claimed he climbed over a wall in the middle of the night to access the victim's bedroom window.
Right.
But Yoon had a severe physical disability from polio. How does a judge or prosecutor look at a man who physically cannot climb a wall and convict him of a wall climbing crime?
It defies all logic.
Yeah.
But back then, the confession was all that mattered. The justice system had a narrative, and despite the glaring physical impossibilities, they pushed it through.
So in 1989, Yoon is sentenced to life in prison.
Yeah, an innocent man becomes just a number in the system.
And with Yoon in prison, the official murders eventually just stop in 1991. The police pack up, but it leaves this permanent gaping scar on the national psyche.
Oh, absolutely. The case just fades into history as this giant unsolved trauma.
And by 2006, the 15-year statute of limitations on the murders actually expired.
Which is a crucial legal detail. It meant the killer was legally untouchable. Even if he walked into a police station, they couldn't charge him for Hwaseong.
Which is just deeply frustrating. But the trauma of it all really morphed into pop culture. It heavily inspired the 2003 cinematic masterpiece Memories of Murder.
Incredible film.
Yeah, and it really shows how the case became a national ghost story that South Korea simply couldn't shake.
And while the country is watching movies about it, Yoon is still sitting in a cell.
Right. Until 2009, when Yoon was finally paroled after serving 20 years behind bars.
A completely broken man.
Yeah, a man who still maintained his innocence to anyone who would listen, including his former prison code.
It's tragic. But while the statute of limitations expired, the physical evidence from the original crime scenes was still sitting in storage.
Just waiting for science to catch up.
Exactly. And that brings us to the massive breakthrough decades later.
The DNA.
Yes. Fast forward to 2019. Advances in forensics finally allow investigators to extract microscopic DNA samples from the victim's clothing.
Specifically the underwear they were bound with, right?
Yes. The very items the killer used as ligatures.
So they extract this DNA, they run it through the national database, and boom, they get a match.
They do. It links to a man who is already serving a life sentence in a prison in Busan.
Which is just wild. Who is this monster hiding in plain sight?
His name was Lee Chun-jae. He was 56 years old at the time of the DNA match.
And why was he already in prison?
Well, he had been locked up since 1994. 3 years after the last Hwaseong murder, he drugged, raped, and murdered his 18-year-old sister-in-law.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so he was convicted for that and was sitting in a cell all those years while the public was agonizing over the unsolved serial killings.
But wait, how did he slip through the net during the original 1980s manhunt? I mean, they questioned 21,000 people.
This is the tragic irony of it all. Lee had actually been questioned back then. He lived in the area, he fit the profile.
So why didn't they arrest him?
Because his blood type was O. The police were blindly hunting for type B, remember? Because of that one flawed sample.
So they literally had the guy, looked at his blood type, and let him go.
Exactly. They dismissed him.
That is sickening. So, cut to 2019, profilers visit him in prison to confront him with the new DNA evidence. And his reaction is just chilling.
Oh, completely devoid of emotion.
Yeah, he just looks at them and says, "So now you finally found me."
Like it was a game that just ended.
Yeah, and then he just unloads everything, right? The confession.
He does. He confesses to 14 murders. The original 10 in Hwaseong, plus 4 more that the police didn't even know were him.
And over 30 sex crimes.
Yeah. And the scary part is how effortlessly he recalled it all. He sat there and drew perfect maps of the crime scenes. He remembered exactly where everything happened decades later.
But the detail that I found deeply, deeply disturbing was his psychopathic pride.
Oh, about you.
Yeah. Lee was reportedly annoyed that Yoon Sung-yeo had taken the credit for the 8th murder.
It's pure narcissism.
Right. Lee viewed the killings as his work, and he actually felt robbed of the infamy because an innocent disabled man was sitting in prison for it.
It really shows you the absolute lack of humanity we're dealing with. But ironically, Lee's detailed confession about that 8th murder is what finally brings justice for Yoon.
Yes, finally some good news. Yoon gets a retrial.
He does. In 2020, there's this dramatic courtroom scene. Yoon is there, and he watches as the real killer, Lee Chun-jae, confesses on the stand to the crime Yoon served 20 years for.
I can't even imagine what that must have felt like for Yoon.
It had to be surreal. But the court fully exonerated Yoon. He was cleared of everything, and he was awarded $2.87 million in compensation.
Which, I mean, it's a lot of money, but no amount of cash buys back 20 stolen years.
Not at all.
And it leaves you with this really dark, provocative question to ponder. What happens to a society when the justice system designed to protect it becomes a perpetrator of trauma itself?
It's a profound betrayal.
Yeah. Yoon received money, sure, but Lee Chun-jae will never face legal prosecution for the Hwaseong murders because the statute of limitations expired.
He's already doing life for his sister-in-law, but legally, he gets away with the serial murders.
Right. The truth was found, but was justice truly served? It's something that just lingers with you long after you look at the facts.
It definitely does.
Thanks for listening to The Evidence Room. If you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe for more true crime investigations from around the world. Remember, some cases remain unsolved, but the evidence always tells a story.